Hi, I'm 𝐻𝐻𝐸, and this is 𝐻𝐻𝐸's Crafty World. I haven't done a reading journal update in forever. I've been asked quite a few times, when is the next update coming? And to be honest, it took me forever to set up this journal for this year, but I've finally gotten there. I've finally done it. We are 7 months into 2025, but I have done it. Now, my reading journal is a little bit different from your standard reading journal. I don't do a new journal every year where I set up the entire journal for that year's reading. The reason behind this is because I just simply don't read that much. I love reading, and when I do, I really get into my books. But I don't read consistently, so for me, setting up a new reading journal every year is just not realistic. I'm not going to fill that journal, and I'll just be fooling myself and wasting my own time. So I created a reading journal that will last multiple years. So I use this travel-sized notebook from the Notebook Therapy, and you can see it's been well loved. It's got some stains on it because it's quite a light fabric cover, but I try and keep it as clean as possible. I found a good tip from another YouTuber that has the same journal, and she just uses an eraser to get rid of some of the dirt or the stains that accumulates, but you can't always get all of them. To be honest, I wish I got a darker journal, just because this one does stain quite easily, and it's not like I take this journal with me. It just stays in my office. So starting off, I have my rating system. I just have a basic star system. I don't go into crazy detail. These first few pages are my long-term pages. I chose to set it up in a Harry Potter theme. So at the beginning, I have my little Hogwarts castle sketch that I did. Next up, I have places I've visited, a map where I write down the locations in which my books are set in. Then I have my bookshelf. This is for my physical books. So any physical books that I own will be put on my shelf. If you watched my original setup, you'll notice that this bookshelf looks a little bit different. I had to update it because it was just looking a little used, a little simple, basic, if you will. So I added some more elements to it. Then of course I have my audiobooks. I listen to quite a few while I'm working, but this isn't something I do often. So this specific spread gets filled in slowly over time. Next up is my 100 books challenge. This one will also go over multiple years, and once I hit 100, which as you can see is gonna take me quite a while. Once I hit 100, I'll probably set up a new page and go from 100 to 200 until I finish this journal. Now, this next page was going to be one of my long-term pages. This is my reading log, but to be honest, I got a little bored with this page. Not with the concept of a reading log, but just this specific layout. So I decided to include the title 2024 for last year and designate this page for 2024 only. I also wanted to include first sentences as an overall long-term page, but I severely underestimated how much space it would take to write all the first sentences. So this one I also decided to date. The same goes for the quote page. I absolutely love how this page looks with all of my favorite quotes from the books that I've read. The next tracker is my genre tracker. Now, I'm not too fussy about it. If there is a fantasy romance book, I'll probably be coloring in both boxes because I feel like it fits both genres. I did, however, not get too far with this book bingo, so I don't think I'll be including this specific kind of bingo in the future. Then we get to my 2024 book bracket, where I wrote down all of my favorite books. I started with 6 books, then broke it down to the 3 best ones that I really enjoyed. Then I took it to my 2 top favorites, which was The Night Circus and Slewfoot. And I absolutely loved both of these books so much. But the top spot had to go for The Night Circus. It was such a deep, meaningful read. Then we have my 2024 Days Read. I decided not to include this one in my next setup just because I already usually track what I read in my bullet journal, so this is probably a page that's gonna fall away. Fantasy bingo, I did really well. I basically finished the entire thing. Then we have the classic book challenge. One of my main goals for 2024 was to read some of the classics, so I am gonna take a few of these that I haven't read and probably migrate them to my new classic book challenge. Then I had my book club ideas spread. As you can see, I only read 1 book with my friend, which was The Night Circus. We didn't get to our other books that we wanted to read together just because we were both kind of just reading our own thing. Then of course, my books to check out. This spread I will definitely still be using. I'm not gonna migrate, I'll just use the spread. I don't see any reason for me to redo it. I'll just go through this list and see which books I want to read next. Then for spooky season, I had to create a Halloween reading list, and I've discovered that I'm very much an autumn-winter reader. This is the time of year that I read the most. Lastly, my 2024 reading wrapped. So I read 23 books in total, 0 physical books, which I'll talk about more in a minute. Kindle, I read 17 books. The pages were 9,408 pages. My most read month was in August. And then audiobooks, I read or listened to 6 of them. So last year, my husband bought me a Kindle for my birthday. I had one before, but it was tiny and very old and very used. So he bought me a new Kindle. So not only did I have a new toy, I went on a downloading spree. So I got and purchased a bunch of Kindle books off of Amazon. And that's probably why I only read Kindle books. And then I also started with audiobooks for the first time. Next up, I'm going to be setting up my reading journal for 2025. If you've been paying attention, I'm sure you've noticed some Easter eggs at the beginning of the video, and you've probably figured out my theme already. I am doing my 2025 reading journal in an Alice in Wonderland theme. I've always loved Alice in Wonderland. It's always been one of my absolute favorite stories, and I picked up this notebook at a local bookstore. I honestly have no idea how to link it. If you were interested, maybe you could find something like this on Amazon, I'm sure. But I'm going in and ripping out some of the pages that I really like. The art style of this notebook is very much Studio Ghibli, Alice in Wonderland. So if you know my journaling style, I do this a lot in my bullet journal as well. I have fallen in love with the scrapbooky, junk journal-esque style of just layering a lot of ephemera and different papers and stickers. So I'm going to be starting with covering both pages with the paper that I took from the notebooks, and I really just want to cover the background and go in layer by layer. This first spread is kind of more of a cover page, an introduction to the reading journal's theme, and this is really not going to be a usable page or something that I use every time, but just a page to kind of have fun with a lot of the ephemera and stickers and introduce you to the new section in the reading journal. Because I'm doing multiple years, I want each year's section to really stand out and be different from the next. I'm not using all of these pages as a whole. Some of them I am ripping into smaller sections and just using the images themselves. And to distress them a little bit more, I'm using this distress ink pad from Ranger in the color Gathered Twigs. I've had this for so long. It was gifted to me by my mother and I've used it for probably 3 years and the ink is still really good. I've seen that they're expensive. I was lucky enough to get it as a gift, but they last really, really long as you, of course, keep the lid on it and don't let it dry out. Then I went in with this Alice's Adventure in Wonderland, the wraparound design on the notebook itself, which I'm not gonna use. I would have just thrown away, but in pure junk journal style, you throw nothing away ever. So I've just cut out the name and I'm gonna glue that in here, and I'm gonna use that as the title. Online, I looked up Alice in Wonderland stickers and I found this sticker sheet. It has a mixture, which I really like. It has a mixture of stickers from the classic Alice in Wonderland, as well as some, you'll see later on, a bit more animated styles. I really like that it has the original one. It makes me feel like it's straight from my childhood. These playing cards have a little bit of a backstory. When I turned 21, I had a big birthday party back home and I chose an Alice in Wonderland theme. I know, funny for a 21-year-old, but I thought it would be really cool to dress up. So I had bought these cards then for decoration and I've kept them for so many years, and I've just been using them slowly over time. Every time that I have usually an Alice in Wonderland theme, I'll pull out these cards, so you'll probably see them again in the future. But they are very old and I've been using them for a long time. So I love just adding these little elements in my journals. Next up, this double spread is going to be my reading goals. Now, Just like the previous page, this one is also going to be very junk journaly, and I love how this one turned out in the end, but let's not get ahead of ourselves. I'm using some book ephemera, book pages to fill in the background. This spread is basically going to be tea party theme. I went through all of my papers and ephemera and looked for anything that looked like it could be at a tea party. A lot of these pictures are also vintage, which I love and goes so well with this theme. As I mentioned before, I grew up with Alice in Wonderland, and I distinctly remember requesting my mom read me to sleep with Alice's Adventures in Wonderland so many times, nightly, probably every night, because it really was one of my favorite stories. I've always loved the adventures that she goes on and how kooky and crazy everyone in the story is. Of course, I absolutely love the film with Johnny Depp, one of my favorite actors, who just played the Mad Hatter so well. The stickers for this page, I went through and I chose everything that had to do with the tea party. And just to bring that theme to life, you have the pocket watch at the top and Alice speaking to the Mad Hatter holding a cake, as well as the Mad Hatter and the rabbit drinking tea together. Why is a raven like a writing desk? Have you guessed the riddle yet? The Hatter said, turning to Alice again. No, I give it up, Alice replied. What's the answer? I haven't the slightest idea, said the Hatter. Interestingly enough, while I was setting up my reading journal, I went onto YouTube and looked up Alice's Adventures in Wonderland audiobook, and as I was setting it up, I was listening to the audiobook, which is actually a really short audiobook. My reading goals will be most likely how many books I want to read. I might include how many pages I want to read by the end of the year. If I want to read mostly physical books or have some Kindle books, I'll probably include an amount of audiobooks that I'd like to listen to as well. And like I said, I've already got one audiobook out of the way just from setting up this reading journal. Okay, so next we're moving into the more practical pages. I feel like these first two pages were me really just having fun and getting some of my creative juices flowing. This is books read in 2025. So this is gonna be my new reading tracker. If you remember in my previous one, when we did the flip through, I had the library card. This one has a lot more space. I'm gonna use both pages. I don't think I'm gonna need more than these two. So decoration in this spread is gonna be a lot more simple, a lot more minimal, if you will. So I just have the book title, the author. Now the author space is quite small, so I'm most likely just going to use their initials. Then I have the date. I don't really like giving myself specific dates, as in I started on the 1st and finished on the 25th. I prefer to just put down the month that I read the book or the month that I finished the book, the amount of pages so that I can track it at the end of the year, and then the star rating. Now in this one, I'm not gonna draw all of the stars. I'll just be writing the number of the stars. For decorations, I'm using some scrap ephemera. that I had lying around just as a little bit of a layer, and then just using some cute Alice sitting in flowers and playing with the kitten stickers. I absolutely love including this spread in my reading journal. I think I will most likely have this every year, and this is the first sentences. I really enjoyed doing this last year. I think it looked really nice having the first sentences of each of the books that I read. Some of them are really long, so it takes a lot of space, but luckily I have quite small handwriting, so I do quite well to fit them in. A while back I purchased these stamps, and this is the first time I'm using them. I did use my eraser to kind of buff them out a little bit so the ink will stick better, but I must say they did still print unevenly. The theme for this page is, of course, if you haven't noticed, the rabbit. I saw this sticker and I really wanted to make a spread dedicated to him, looking at his watch, running around saying, "I'm late, I'm late, I'm late." Next up, I'm going in again with this letter stamp. I did it the first time, but it was very light, so this time I went in with a darker marker and printed that over top. And that is the finished page. Pretty simple, and I don't think it'll be too bad for me to write over the clocks. They are printed quite light. I went with a brown color in my Tombow dual brush pens, so using a black pen should be fine to just write over those. And I'm excited to see what it's going to look like once I start using it. Then, of course, my quotes page. I'm not going to write down all of the quotes that I enjoy. I'm just going to do my favorite ones. The theme for this page is flowers and all the gardens, and definitely that scene where she is speaking to the flowers and so surprised that they are speaking back to her. I also included these little flowers, and I just wanted it to be a mix of blue for Alice's dress and then purples and pinks for the cat. I didn't really like this flower. I thought it was more blue, but it turned out to be a lot more green and it didn't really fit, so I had to rip that one out and replaced it with blue flowers. These next spreads are for my trackers. So I'm going to be including 2 trackers in this reading journal setup. The first one is my genre tracker, where I'll be tracking which genre books I read as well as my audiobooks. I have multiple genres and I like to mark off multiple genres for each book that I read. So for example, if it's a fantasy book, I will mark that it's a fantasy, but if it's a fantasy romance, a romantasy, then I'll also tick off, or I'll also color in the romance genre. Also with the classics, if it's a classic and a horror, then I'll tick both of those. If it's a retelling and a graphic novel, I'll tick both of those, etc. I covered the entire page with this beautiful paper of Alice standing and looking at the garden and the flowers. And then I tried my best to mimic the Alice in Wonderland font. Sometimes it looks a little rough, but I think it didn't turn out too bad. What do you think? Speaking of childhood books, what was your favorite story? Of course, I've said mine was Alice in Wonderland. I also had a good, healthy obsession with Peter Pan. That was also one of my favorites. I recently bought the Brothers Grimm fairy tales and I have it on my bedside, and as if I were a little child. Not that a lot of those stories are for children, but in the evenings, if I'm not in the mood for my main book that I'm reading, I'll read one of the short stories in there before I go to bed. And some of them are really creepy, but I enjoy stories like that. And I've really been enjoying the Grimm's fairy tales, the Brothers Grimm. If you haven't read it and you loved reading stories as a kid, I highly, highly recommend getting one of those and having that be a bedtime story for yourself. I even ended up reading one of the stories to my husband one night. The next tracker is a new tracker for me. I didn't include this one in my previous setup. And to be honest, that's mostly because I haven't read a book series in years. I almost want to say scared of the dedication I used to read a lot of book series when I was in high school, but after school, I didn't read for a long time because we were traveling quite a bit until I got my first Kindle. Then I read a lot more, and I might have read a few series, but very short ones, like only 3 books or only 2 books in the series. But as we all know, fantasy books can get heavy with the series. And this year, for the first time in a long time, I'm taking on a series, and I'm busy reading the Witcher book series. So I'm only including this one little bookshelf with this particular series, and I'm leaving the rest of the page empty for when I read the next series. So we'll have to see how this spread works out, if I'm gonna add any more bookshelves to it. I didn't want to add empty ones because obviously if I do start a new series, I don't know how many books are gonna be in that series. Of course, it's not a reading journal setup if there's not at least one book bingo. My next spread, which is also the last spread in this setup, my classics. I'm sure I've probably mentioned this before. Last year, I started really delving into the classics. Some of them I read when I was younger, or at least tried to read. It took me years, many years, and many different tries to read Wuthering Heights. And I finally was able to completely finish it last year, sit through, work through it. Audiobook helped me out a lot with that one, just to get me through it, and I ended up liking and hating it at the same time, which if you've ever read Wuthering Heights, you probably agree with me. It's one that you hate to love. My last list, as I said before, was quite extensive and a little bit too long. So this year I'm only including a few, and I really want to try to make sure that I get all of these before the end of the year, which you'll see later. One of them I've already completed, being Alice in Wonderland. I have no problem with audiobooks. I think audiobooks are reading too. So I usually like to do my classics in audiobooks if I don't have the physical copies. I do now have the physical copy of Jane Eyre as well as To Kill a Mockingbird. So those I will be reading the physical books of. I did start Little Women on audiobook, so that one won't take too long to get ticked off as well. If you are still here, thank you so much. This has been a very long video, and I'm so happy that you've stuck around this far. If you are listening to this section, go ahead and comment. Let's say, all right, so please go ahead and comment down below your favorite childhood story, as well as your favorite Alice in Wonderland character, but in emoji. So if you love the rabbit, go ahead and comment a rabbit, an emoji of a rabbit. If you loved the queen, maybe do a crown and a heart. The Mad Hatter, you can do a hat. Let's see how creative everyone can get with the emojis, and I'll comment mine in a few days. Let's see how many we can get. And lastly, I am just filling in my book bingo. Feel free to pause at the end to look at all of them, but I'll read you a few of these. So we have a book published in 1996, which is a bingo that I missed in my last bingo, and I really want to try and get that one this year. I have, of course, an audiobook, a book set in a different country, a book with more than 500 pages. Throw in some vampires, a male author, magical creatures, fictional world, a series, which I'm busy with, exciting, a small town, a mystery, friends to lovers, and the oldest book on my TBR, and so many more. So let's see how many I can get through this year. And there you have it, my Alice's Adventure in Wonderland reading journal theme. I hope you enjoyed this video. Remember to comment down below, and also like and subscribe if you'd like to see more of my content. And as always, I hope that you have a very crafty day.